Hi, this is The Wisdom of Do Something Else. It was originally titled Adapting to Experiencing Someone's Attention as Being Unavailable, like they were distracted with something else, preoccupied, busy, whatever it may be. So, first, a quick quote. If my experience is that something is not working, do something else. That's what the wisdom of do something else comes about. So, first, consider, in regard to someone else's attention as being unavailable, consider how much of a priority it is for me or you to have that person's attention be however available. Like if life has given me the feedback that this one's attention may not be very available for that, so what? Second, relax my attention from them in particular. Or maybe that comes first, whatever. Next, consider that what could be a priority that is available. I read that wrong. Next, consider what could be a priority that is available. Note, when I experience something as seeming available, as inaccessible or practically relevant, that may be practically relevant. Now, with attention to what seems available, as it seems practically relevant, does any particular possibility stand out as an obvious focus for my time and attention? Here's an example. Let's imagine that I happen to have a certain job. Within that job, there are certain things that I value, such as the paycheck and producing commissions that show up on the paycheck. There are certain things that are very much within my direct influence within that particular job, though other people may have some influence as well, of course. So I could focus on various prospective clients, like which ones do I make a priority for my attention and why, like a systematic formula for having some kind of a ranking where myself and other people can say, well, here's the ranking system that we're working with here. So it's, provides a degree of certainty, or at least a point of reference. Which ones of my various prospective clients do I make a priority for my attention, and why? How do I make them a priority? So I could focus on adhering to various guidelines, right? Or take actions to develop new ones, new guidelines, or explore altering old ones. Of course, I may encounter resistance, like from another person. I may encounter any varieties of boundaries from prospective clients, within myself, within my organization I'm working within. Those boundaries can be money, schedule, cell phone reception issues, objections from a prospective client, and so on. For instance, if I'm consistently reprioritizing what to do, reprioritizing what to do when, then that mode of operation expects to encounter boundaries sometimes. I'm reprioritizing because I'm going to be encountering boundaries, and I recognize boundaries are part of pretty much anything. There's going to be boundaries that I encounter. There's going to be yeses, there's going to be no's, there's going to be maybes, there's going to be sometimes when I'm the one who says no, or I'm the one who says maybe. So if I know that patterns will eventually change and that boundaries will change, that's a context in which I'm consistently reprioritizing. But boundaries work. If I do not ever explore the boundaries, I may miss that old boundaries may no longer be binding, or I may miss that certain boundaries are more restrictive than I previously experienced. Like when someone moves around the furniture and it's dark and I walk around the room and find out that someone moved the furniture. It's good to be attentive to the possibility that boundaries can change without me knowing. Mm-hmm. So one thing to do is to create a game. Again, this could be in regard to a particular job, for instance. My experience of existing boundaries is simply part of the rules of the game as I define them. I define my experience of the boundaries and the context in which I frame the boundaries. So with regard to a paycheck, an obvious game is to, one, keep them coming, keep the paychecks coming. It's one game I can focus on the possibility of keeping them coming. They may come continually, they may not, but that can be my point of reference. Or two, to maintain or even increase the amount of pay. That could be over, paycheck or a particular period of time. However, I might also choose to revise the game. I take on the game so I can revise the game, the boundaries of the games in terms of how I put boundaries on my time, attention, money, and so on. So I might choose to revise the game in terms of changing the amount of hours that I commit to the job. I could alter my schedule, just change when I do the same number of hours, or I could increase my schedule or reduce my schedule in terms of the number of hours. So let's move on now from this context of job. That was just a simple example. Let's move on to relationships. This is back to the thing of someone else's attention. In my case, it was more in regard to relationships that I was interested in this. So if the priority of my game is for personal well-being, or for fun, or for family, those are all distinct contexts. A focus on personal well-being asks, what's in it for me? By the way, if there's an immediate perceived threat to my personal well-being, then the importance of personal well-being to me may be suddenly clear. When I experience threat, other priorities get set aside, and personal well-being comes right to the focus. So a focus on fun things, or a focus on fun, asks things like, is this something that I would begin doing if I hadn't already been doing it? Is it fun? Is it enjoyable? Is this something that I would begin doing, like this particular way of doing it and so on, if I hadn't already been doing it? So that's beyond effectiveness. It has to do with like my sense of being in the zone, flow. Fun, of course, tends to be social, but fun could be, playing music or any variety of things that aren't inherently social. I might just enjoy, building a house in a particular way. When I'm done with it, I'm like, have pride in what I've done. And again, fun tends to be social, but it could be that, we can broaden this. I'm just using fun, for example. So a focus on fun asks things like, is this something that I would begin doing if I hadn't been doing it already? Doesn't mean I'm not going to continue if it's not fun, just that's the kind of context or filter that fun might bring up. It could be appreciation, we could say a few different ways. I pick fun. So a context of fun tends to presume that personal well-being issues are already satisfied and stable. Or else, again, if personal well-being issues come into an experience of threat, then they arise back to the forefront, to the priority, and issues of fun tend to be, at least temporarily, ignored. So in other words, people may not focus on fun when a water line freezes. It just interrupts the whole, plan A. Or when a tree penetrates the roof and the floodwaters begin to rise and approach the height of the power outlets. So fun is a perfectly valid focus. It's just that reprioritizing could go on in a moment. Fun's about doing something more or doing something less. That's what I'm calling fun. Or perhaps even interrupting something that's really not fun. While personal well-being is essential, fun is merely favorable. It has to do more with the methods, I would say. Personal well-being is about outcomes. If it's like pretty important to have a certain outcome. Fun has to do with the way that something is approached. So a focus on family is distinct from either of the above, either focus on fun or focus on personal well-being. Family priorities may involve sacrificing not only fun, but also sacrificing of personal well-being. One can identify family as a partnership of two specific people, or even a large network of loose relationships, typically involving biological similarity, to be called family. But people who join together in business networks, which they can simply transfer their partnership by selling stock shares, they're not likely to intentionally sacrifice personally for the benefit of the company or the benefit of the collective. Just in nature, yes, there are occasions where an animal or an organism sacrifices for the benefit of the collective, but that tends to be for similar biology, but certainly in cases of war, people sacrifice their lives for their gang or their country or an idea of honor. And those are entirely possible sacrifices. If people do them and use certain language to describe them, well, then those are operating relevant contexts that produce the particular behavior. Nevertheless, bigger and bigger networks tend to have less personal sacrifice. So, on that note, it may be surprising how much that people expect large bureaucracies to sacrifice for them. So large bureaucracies, I mean governments, insurance corporations, even large church organizations. People may expect these large bureaucracies to reliably support them as individuals and even operators of business. Like I'm part of the Chamber of Commerce with my little business of 400 people or whatever, and so I expect the Chamber of Commerce to be very, very receptive to compromise and sacrifice for the well-being and best interest of my business because I'm a member of the Chamber of Commerce, and the Chamber of Commerce should serve me and my business and my interests. That's a possible perspective. How reliable is it that big bureaucracies, especially when they get really big, like the Soviet Union or the United Nations, how reliable is it to rely on these really big corporations? When you get a small company or a particular individual, they tend to get less interest. That's why we have things called lobbying. And big political organizations, you'll have the biggest corporations do extensive lobbying, spend millions of dollars on it. We could call it bribery. We call it lobbying. But the idea is to advance the self-interest of a particular organization or a particular industry, like a collective of pharmaceutical companies all want to do a certain thing to keep out new competition and to promote their industry as a whole or whatever. So people often complain when organizations change their internal boundaries, whether that's a political organization or a business, such as by making a new criminal law, or shutting down one of their facilities, or merging with another operation and incorporating unfamiliar rules. Well, we lobbied for this. We spent $3 million in the last year or last decade, and now you guys go and make a treaty with this other organization. It's something that may produce complaints, may result in complaints. So imagine that the global economy is shifting in some noticeable way. Is this the first time that a noticeable economic shift has ever happened? One can dismiss the noticeable changes, perhaps as hopefully temporary, and instead keep favoring one's old perspective on priorities and keep investing in familiar methods. That tends to produce unfavorable results, which further tend to open people to reprioritize, to humble or even humiliate. Unfavorable results. Perhaps the seasonal climate is shifting in some noticeable way. Is this the first time that a noticeable climatic shift has ever happened? Now, what if somebody's attention is shifting in a noticeable way? Is this the first time that a noticeable attention shift has ever happened? Maybe somebody that I'm really interested in having a certain kind of dynamic of attention with them, and then their attention shifts in some noticeable way, maybe not a fit with what I had hoped. When someone's attention is noticeably shifting, I might be open to being that someone and allowing my attention to shift, to reprioritize. When life gives feedback to me for reprioritizing, my willingness to receive that feedback and my capacity to adapt to it may produce noticeable shifts in my experienced results. But my personal experience and personal well-being may be the result of my responsiveness to life's feedback. My experience of fun and family may also be the result of my adaptiveness to life's feedback. My experiences in general are life's feedback. My relationship to my own experience results is my relationship to life's feedback. What else would life's feedback be except for my own experience results? My experience is life's feedback. How willing am I to adapt to my own experienced results? How willing I am to adapt to my own experienced results could make a difference for my future. If I'm willing, then even a boundary as to my current capacity to adapt simply is experienced as an opportunity to learn, like I encounter some resistance internally or externally, as an opportunity to learn and to collaborate with others who might have competence in some particularly relevant form of adaptiveness. I don't know really how to adapt to that. So I know that. I'm interested in that adaptation. I have someone else support me or someone who I go to the government of a county or whatever level of government, whatever kind of person, an organization, a church, whatever it may be. So my experience of my future may be a function of my willingness to adapt to my own experienced results. That is, my experience of responsibility for my own results as either personal results or systemic. Sorry, I said this wrong. My experience of my future may be a function of my willingness to adapt to my own experienced results. That is, a function of whether my experience of responsibility for my own results is personal or systemic. Am I personally responsible, or is the system responsible for my results? Am I willing to define myself as a victim of the system? Imagine, or as a victim of anything, anyone. Imagine that there might be a systemic program to present people with an identity as the responsibility of the system. I may be taught that I'm the ward of the state, or the ward of the insurance company, or the ward of a particular church or business, or even an individual person, such as a parent or another legal guardian for a minor child. I may learn that, whether I'm taught that. I may learn that. I may pick up that identity, that identity. Of course, as a child presumed to be legally incompetent, let's say a 1-year-old, or even a 5-year-old, or even a 16-year-old, such definitions of the ward of whoever or whatever might be quite accurate. So is it at all odd that there might be systemic or systematic programming to present people like me, like you, with an identity as being the responsibility of the system? Consider that it would be odd if there were not such a programming to tell me that this system or this collective or this individual is the one, not besides me, who's actually responsible for me, and the person who's more competent, more capable, is going to be the legal guardian, whether it's an individual. In my case, I was adopted, so I had the actual state of Florida as the responsible party. Legally responsible for me was the state of Florida. So, we may have all been programmed as children that other particular people and groups are responsible for us. However, as adults, let me comment, and really certain people and groups are responsible for us as children, and we may notice that. We may be informed of that. There may be an emphasis on which group is responsible how, and that's pretty standard. However, as adults, we may recognize that identifying oneself as the responsibility of the system, or even a victim of the system, or even a victim of a particular other person, that may not be in the best interests of one's own personal well-being. Some other identifying might produce favorable feedback from life, as in favorably experienced results. Of course, victim of the climate, or victim of the global economy, or victim of my children are all possible identifying scenarios. Victim of something. All identifying is adaptive, just not for any particular amount of time. If I define myself as a victim, or as someone else's responsibility, that's adaptive, that fit, until it doesn't. Adaptation isn't something that just happened in the past and stopped. It's an ongoing process. Adaptive. So consider that life's feedback on my self-identifying is valuable. It could be. Further, consider that both nurturing and victimization are valuable. A government, a church, a private or corporation or individual may provide me with some valuable attention and support for a certain amount of time and then stop doing so. The organization or person may cease to function, may die, or dissolve in place of an organization. Or life may give the feedback of exposing you to the question of, what if you could do it yourself? Personal responsibility is not for everyone. In fact, huge numbers of people may functionally reject personal responsibility by maintaining the self-identifying of victim. With certain feedback from life, the adaptiveness of such self-identifying may eventually be noticed as only temporary. Okay, victim worked how well it worked and how long it worked, and then stopped working. Maybe it never even worked very well, but probably it did for someone at some point, or it wouldn't be so popular. Sometimes personally experienced results may produce a new willingness, like if they're unfavorable, or if they're really favorable, personally experienced results may produce a new willingness to explore the language of one's own self-defining, self-identifying, self-binding. Whose boundaries are my boundaries? When I speak of the boundaries of my own shifting attention, do I speak of those boundaries as my own? Or as boundaries that a cruel and unusual life has imposed on me unjustifiably and maliciously? Do I speak of my own experience results as life's feedback, as in guidance or support, or as injustices and victimizations and complaints and someone else's responsibility? My relationship to life is my self-identifying. Does life victimize me as life's victim, or does life support and guide me as life's beneficiary or life's reward? That reminds me of the saying of the New Testament. Something about like it's God that has, put every hair on your head and knows the number of hairs that are on your head and all that. Acknowledge. It's one possibility to acknowledge that everything that's ever happened is the fullness of life supporting me. Maybe it was a particular individual, a particular group of people, but those group of people might not have done so well if it wasn't for a certain cultural context, and if it wasn't for sunlight, right? If it wasn't for the oil industry, or if it wasn't for the discovery of electricity, or if it wasn't for, all these history of humans and other processes all have resulted in me. Do I reject that as a mistake, as something wrong with that? That all this history that's produced me and my experience now? Is there something wrong about life's feedback to me and my life as it is, as it's been? Or is there something good, right, fitting, adaptive about how life has brought me feedback, some feedback negative or unfavorable? A whole lot of nourishment and support, or it might be that I would not be alive right this moment, or never would have made it to delivery from pregnancy, or to legal competence at age 18, or whatever it may be. I can look back and look forward with appreciation, or with condescension, condemnation, blame. Who's the proper person for me to resent, or the proper group for me to resent or fear? Well, it's all fine, but even fear and resentment can turn me to learn and adapt. It's certainly fine if I have a very negative personal experience of a particular subject matter or individual, like interaction with them. It's natural that I would spend less time, than at all, repeating that. That's life's feedback. I adapt based on life's feedback. And so is all the rest of life. Does that victimize me as life's victim, or does life guidance support me as life's beneficiary, as life's fulfillment, as life's prodigal son or daughter, as life's project, as life's experiment, as life's God's creative expression. How willing am I to be responsible for my own self-identity? How willing am I to be responsible for my own experience results, for adapting to life's feedback? So now I'll repeat the title, The Wisdom of Do Something Else. Do something else. Do something else. If my experience is that something is not working,